Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com.
My guest is Luella Gunter. Luella, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Well, thanks for doing this. It's great to meet you. I've heard great things about you from our folks in West Virginia. And as you know from having listened to this podcast, we always like to hear a little bit about our guest's career path. So I want to start there. You started, I believe, in journalism. So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking when you first started thinking about careers, where that took you, and where you went from there.
Okay, thank you. So I grew up in a very small town in West Virginia. It's called Duck, West Virginia.
Really?
Really?
Duck. D-U-C-K.
D-U-C-K.
Wow.
West
Okay.
Virginia. Not North Carolina, which is a tad bit more temperate.
Okay.
West Virginia.
All
And
right.
so I came to school at West Virginia University and wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to do. Ended up in the journalism school, which was the best career path I could have chosen. Concentration in public relations. And so, I had this grandiose dream that I was going to be in New York City at a major agency. And well, life didn't really quite work like that. And so at the time, this was in the early 90s, there was not a lot of opportunity in West Virginia to be a practitioner in public relations. And so I left. I went to North Carolina, worked with an agency. Great experience. And I would say a lot of my career path has been about life events that happened that put me into a different direction. I would love to say that it was all strategically planned and I really knew exactly what I was doing, right? But no one has that crystal ball. And so we had our first child. My husband and I had our first child, and then we had our second child. And I said, okay, this is pretty crazy. I'm in agency life, and I'm going to hang out my shingle and start a freelance business, which was awesome. And there's actually an important point to telling you that, because this is how I got into fundraising.
Okay.
So I hung out my shingle. It was great. The freelance work actually was going well. And there was a private independent school in the area that we lived in North Carolina, grades K through 12. It was beautiful. It's like a small college campus. They were in search of a communications professional. And I thought, oh, well, I'll go pitch them on my skill set and I'll work for them. And so I interviewed with them 2 different times. And at the end of the second interview, they said, well, we really want to hire you. And I'm thinking, great. And they said, but not to do communications. We want you to be our fundraiser. And I said, oh, no. Wrong person, wrong skill set. Never done that in my life.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So no prior experience in fundraising. And for most of us, if you're like me, that's kind of a scary proposition to be asked to ask people for money.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I thought. But you know what? I took a chance. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. They said, we'll train you to be a fundraiser. What we want is your personality.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Interesting.
So I did.
Let me ask you a question if you don't mind. What was it that made you take that leap? Because you're on a path, you have kids, and you're working a job in being a freelancer that allows you to set your own hours. You're doing what you were trained to do, and all of a sudden you're going to say, I'm going to throw all that out the window and go in a different direction. What was it that made you say you wanted to take that turn?
The challenge.
Yeah, okay.
The challenge of trying something new and seeing if I could do it.
Yeah, okay.
Knowing that, you know what, it may not have worked out, but I wanted to take the opportunity and try.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah. So that put me on my fundraising career path, where I've been for the last 20 plus years, because I absolutely love what I do every day. And so my husband and I, with the children, we were in North Carolina. It was 2009. And this opportunity opened up at my alma mater. The journalism school had an opening for their first ever director of development. And I said, you know what? I want that job and I want to go back home. It's time.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we pursued that and we moved back to West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia in 2009. And I did work for the Reed College of Media. Truly enjoyed it. I was there for about 5 years. And then unfortunately, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm.
So at that point, I needed to stop being a road warrior, right? The travel was extensive in what we do, especially in higher ed fundraising. And so
Because you're visiting alumni and going all over the country for school like
absolutely,
WVU.
which was great experience. Loved that. It was wonderful to have those opportunities of travel. But at that point, again, life deals you these things that you're like, okay, I got to make some choices.
Yeah.
And so luckily there was a director of principal giving job open at the WVU Foundation. So it was all still within the same family, right?
Yeah.
And I applied and took that job. And that's really part of my story as to where I am today.
Okay.
So I was director of principal gifts. And then the last position I held was in medicine. I was at WVU Medicine in the Heart and Vascular Institute. Now that was strategic because I wanted to add on top of my higher education fundraising experience, I wanted that medicine side.
Mm-hmm. Was that a result of your own experience, or were there other reasons why you went in that direction? Your experience with being a cancer survivor, or was it unrelated to that?
No, it really wasn't. I just know that there's a lot of opportunity when we look at fundraising on the health system side. And I thought, that would be a nice thing to add as a complement to my skill set.
Sure.
And I wanted to try it. So really, really enjoyed the medicine side.
Yeah.
And so going back to, so that was where I was before I came to Mon Health as the executive director of the foundation.
Okay.
So how I got here is probably the more interesting story. So as director of principal giving at the WVU Foundation, one day I had our CEO of the foundation come in, president of the foundation, and she said, I've got this really cranky donor. He's very upset, and I need you to deal with him because you can deal with him. Okay. So I said, sure, I'll set up a meeting. So I set up a meeting. Turns out that was my CEO, my current CEO, David Goldberg.
Okay.
That was the donor I met that day.
All right.
And key to the story is I couldn't fix his problems. I'm not the president of the university. I'm not the provost.
Sure.
But I listened.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he told me was about his career path and his time, because he's also a WVU graduate.
Okay.
And while at WVU, he had a professor in political science who he credited with literally changing his life and his whole career path.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I know that professor is getting ready to retire. And I knew he was going to move to the other side of the US. And there would never be an opportunity for those two to meet.
Yeah.
And so the right thing to do, whether I got a donation out of the cranky guy or not, which I did, by the way, just so you know, I did in the end. But that was neither here nor there. The right thing to do was connect him with that professor. And so I did. I set up a lunch meeting, and I actually got to attend. And he was able to tell his professor in person what he had meant to him. And it was a wonderful moment. And so it was amazing. And it was just great to see it in person. But then, you never burn a bridge, right? And you just never know how you can touch people. And so it was 2019, and I get a call from David Goldberg. And he said, I want to meet with you and have coffee. I want you to come run our foundation. And I said, oh, I'm happy where I'm at. Took a few coffees. And he said, you're the kind of person that I want to work with me and to work with our donors. He was like, the way you handled my interaction is how you're going to handle everyone else's.
Oh, wow.
And so I came here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, there's a lesson in that. So if there are people listening who maybe never think of fundraising as a career, the advantage is it puts you in touch with some pretty influential people and can lead to some really great career opportunities. So
absolutely.
Good for you and taking advantage of that. So, Luella, tell us a little bit. You mentioned Mon Health. Tell us a little bit about the company you work for, the entity you work for. What does the entity do? How is it related to Vandalia and everything else, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind laying that out for us?
Yeah. So in 2019, when I came here, it was Mon Health System. We have 4 hospitals. We are the community hospital, right? And so, things have just grown by leaps and bounds since I've been here. It's amazing. I mean, this is one of those lessons, though, where you learn how you need to flex
Mhm.
and you need to adjust because things can change very, very quickly,
Yeah.
especially in healthcare. Of course,
Mhm.
we had that small thing called the pandemic right
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
I came. So there was
Yeah.
that. Um, so now, once we have integrated with CAMC and we've become Vandalia Health, 4 hospitals, now 17 hospitals. I mean, it's amazing. And to look at the coverage that we have truly from the north to the south part of the state, we cover the entire state. And I think that's really important because you're giving these rural communities a choice in their healthcare. I
Yeah.
mean, I know as a consumer and that young lady from Duck, West Virginia,
Yeah.
my family's still there. I want
Yeah.
them to have a choice in healthcare and their
Yeah.
providers. So it's really exciting. It's an exciting time to be here. The integration has gone amazingly well. I have a
Yeah.
counterpart in the southern part of the state because CAMC has their own foundation.
Yeah.
He's wonderful to work with. So I really cover the northern part of our state, and he covers the
Okay.
southern in terms of fundraising.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you the only tough question I'm gonna ask this morning. You and I have some parallels. I worked for a healthcare system for about 5 years, and it was on the marketing side, but I was the marketing rep who worked with the foundation. So I have an appreciation for a little bit and an understanding of how fundraising works in the healthcare setting. Not nearly as much experience as you have. But how do you make a case for the need for fundraising? A lot of people will say, well, healthcare is expensive and I get all these bills. And then you're coming to them and asking them to make a charitable donation. What's the case for that? What's the place for the foundation in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question, and I get that quite a bit. Um, you're exactly right. That's exactly what we hear from people. My bills are exorbitant. Healthcare is costing me a fortune. Why would I help you? Well, we are the margin of excellence, right? Not everything is built into operating budgets.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
things that happen within an operating year that the
Mhm.
hospital has to flex and pivot and be able to handle. Those
Yeah.
private dollars are critical for us to be able to quickly fill some of those emergency needs.
Yeah. 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 No, that's a
And there
great
are a
answer.
lot.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're serving rural communities, when you are
Absolutely.
trying to treat as many people as you can help, that's a daunting task.
And people, you said it, rural. There are
Mm.
so many challenges that come with rural that people
Yeah.
don't realize.
Mhm.
A lot of the folks we treat, we think about our cancer treatment, they're coming from 2, 3, 4 hours away.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they can't afford a place to stay,
Mhm.
let alone sometimes the fuel in their car to get here. I mean,
Yeah.
we cover those. For us, we say small things. They're not small. They're
Yeah.
huge when you're seeking treatment.
Yeah. So tell me, Luella, what are some of the things that are at the top of your to-do list? What are some of the things you're working on that maybe they're, exciting, maybe they're keeping you up at night, maybe they're a combination of those things. What's at the top of your list of priorities in terms of projects and initiatives?
We have a really exciting project we're working on, and I'll get to that in a second. But when I think about my day to day, right,
Yeah.
and what I'm looking at, and I'm a fundraiser, so you think, well, she's out there asking for money all day long.
Mhm.
Well, not always. I
Yeah.
I need to be out there more, frankly.
Sure.
But there's an administrative side to running a foundation. There's a business
Mhm.
side.
Yeah.
There's a fiduciary side.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges I faced when I came here, and one of the things that really, probably scared me the most, to be honest, was the financial side. Because let's face it, I'm a journalism major.
Yeah.
I deal with words.
Yep.
Right?
For sure.
Numbers.
You're talking to an English major, so same
Right.
situation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, wow, I have to know how to look at a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Right. And I have to understand our investments.
Yeah.
And I have learned so much in my soon to be 5 years. It's been amazing. And what I also learned is that numbers tell a story, right?
Yeah.
So I can still use my words, right? I
Mhm.
can, and I actually ask for help sometimes with those numbers still. So there is that,
You and me both. Yes.
to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's been I'm still learning, which is the really great thing about this job. At
Yeah.
my age, right? I don't know it all.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm a seasoned fundraiser and I'm pretty good at that, but I'm still learning day to day.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that.
Yeah. That's great.
But
That's great.
my
Yeah.
exciting project, I'm sorry, I totally digressed on you.
Nope,
My
that's all
exciting
good.
project is that we are building, talking about those patients that are traveling here with no place to stay.
Yeah.
We are building our first ever caring cottages, what they're called, our wonderful auxiliary. By the way, they're in their 80th year this
Oh, wow.
year, 80 years of our auxiliary. They, through their major fundraising event of the year called the Ball of the Year, our annual gala, they donated the proceeds to start this project, to seed it. And so we will be building on our campus duplex style cottages to serve the families and patients who have that need of a place to stay while they are receiving their treatment.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
go ahead, excuse me.
So these are facilities that people can stay at no cost while a loved one is being treated at one of the hospitals. Is correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And how?
Or if they're being treated, right?
Yeah.
We have radiation patients who come in and they have to receive radiation 5 days a week for maybe 5 to 6 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
They need a place to stay.
Well, and driving long distances or being a passenger in a car for long distances does nothing to improve your health or at least your state of mind. So it's great that they can go get some rest and then come back when they need to. That's an amazing asset. So how big will the facility be? How many folks are you going to be able to accommodate?
So we'll start with our initial duplex style cottage. And so it will have, one family or patient can be housed on either side. Our ability to trend that by volume is really the interesting thing. So the tract of land that we have that the hospital owns, we have the ability to build up to 6 of those cottages.
Yeah.
So we'll, smartly, operationally, we'll watch that trend and that volume. And as we need to expand, we can expand.
Excellent. So what's the timeline for these facilities coming online?
Late spring will be the first.
Oh, that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that must be very fulfilling. It's, a lot of times from my, and I will stress limited experience with fundraising is, there's times when you get to see the tangible result of the work you do, and there's times when you don't. This is a case where you very much can see it being built and see where the dollars are going. So that's great. Well, that's probably enough to consume most of your time, but is there anything else at the top of the list? Anything else you're spending your time on?
Well, I'm spending my time always building partnerships in our community with our external stakeholders. We couldn't do it without it's just an amazing community to work within that supports this hospital system, but also our internal stakeholders. I mean, there's a lot of, as you mentioned, our marketing department. We work, it's so amazing. We work seamlessly with our marketing department. We couldn't do it without them. They are a valued, trusted partner. And a lot of hospital systems do not have that relationship.
Yeah.
So I feel like we are very fortunate in that.
Yeah, well, if they're doing their job and telling the story, it's going to make you known quantity when you pick up the phone or knock on the door, and that's going to give you a running start. It doesn't do your job for you, unfortunately, but it gives you a nice head start. All right. Well,
right?
this is great. So, Luella, I want to pivot to a couple more quick hit questions, and you can
Sure.
be as expansive with these as you'd like. They don't have to be quick hit, but you've said a lot of great things about your career path, your experience as a cancer survivor. In all the lessons you've taken away from those experiences, what's the best piece of advice you have for building a successful and fulfilling career? If someone is wondering, what's the secret, or what's one of the things I need to focus on if I want to have a career that serves my needs and that makes me fulfilled and successful? What's that piece of advice?
My favorite piece of advice, and I give this to my three children all the time,
Yeah,
and to some of the younger staff who work with me.
yeah,
Do not be afraid to make a decision. Oftentimes, I feel like, and especially young people, are so crippled
yeah,
by, is this the right decision to make? It could be really the bad decision.
yeah,
Any decision you make in your career path in your life, it can be changed.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
it can come with challenges to change it, but anything can be reversed. And I think that knowing that, it's what's helped me as a leader. I'm not afraid of decision making. And I
yeah.
think that's a huge thing for young people to learn when they're just starting out in their careers.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice, and you've hit a very productive nerve. I'll try not to get as excited about it as I could, but I was listening to a podcast this weekend, and the individual who was being interviewed said that so many times we think we make a decision and we can't go back. For someone who maybe, like, you made a pretty considerable career pivot where you had a successful career in PR and journalism, you pivoted to fundraising. What people sometimes forget is if that didn't work out, you could always go back. It wouldn't.
Absolutely.
It's something you could revert to. The conversation I listened to was framed as A and B decisions. A decisions are the ones you really need to think about, because once you make the decision, there's no going back. But so many decisions are B decisions where there is the opportunity to revert. And
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, and I'm stealing this quote from the same podcast, that decisions lead to information. Even if it's a mistake, you're going to know more and be able to learn from that. So, I agree with that. I have a bias to action that sometimes gets me in trouble. But there's times when I'm glad I made the decision, even if it wasn't a perfect decision, because I learned from it. I think that's really important for people to hear. I love that advice.
Yep, I agree. And that's really been, my whole career path. I've learned all along the way. And I
Yeah,
didn't make all the right decisions, trust me,
sure.
but I was
Yeah.
able to go back and change things. And that's what's important for people to understand.
All right. Well, you've set the bar really high with your first answer. So let me hit you with the second one. When it comes to the work you do, and this could be about the organization you work for, it could be about fundraising in general, it could be about anything you choose. What is a myth or misconception, or for that matter, something that's underappreciated? So a myth or misconception you want to clear up about the work you do, or something that maybe needs to be amplified that isn't well enough understood.
Ooh, that is a tough one. I think that probably the biggest misconception, and I've heard this throughout the years, I've had people say to me, you really should go into sales. You would be really good at that because what you do is just like sales. Fundraising is not sales. I don't sell.
Okay, so make
I,
that distinction for me, because I've heard that 1,000 times and never questioned it.
yeah.
Maybe I should. What's the distinction between the two?
So here's what I do differently than sales.
Yeah.
I, first of all, I get to know people. I create relationships. That's the
Mhm.
bottom line. If you can't
Yeah.
create a relationship, don't get into fundraising.
Yeah.
First priority.
Sure.
I connect people and their passion to a purpose for their
Mhm.
philanthropic dollars. That's the difference. That's
Mhm.
what I do. I don't
Yeah.
sell them anything. I'm not
Mhm.
selling widgets.
Yeah.
I take the time, and that's the biggest difference. I mean, we all have metrics, right? Salespeople have metrics, fundraisers have metrics,
Sure.
but I have the ability to take the time and build the relationship and listen. I listen to the donor about what their passion is, and then I connect them. So
Yeah.
essentially, sometimes I say, I'm a connector.
Yeah. Well, it's so critically important because, again, in the limited experience that I've had watching, mostly coming from watching people who really know what they're doing in the fundraising arena, different things are going to matter to different donors. There's some who it may be that they see a need in the community, they want to help fill the gap. For others, it could be a heartstrings. They have personal experience and they
Right.
want to give back and pay it forward. Others may be very pragmatic and they may say, I want my name on a building. I want my legacy to live on. And all of those are good decisions. But if you speak the wrong language to a donor, you're not going to get very far. So the listening piece, I think, is critical. And that I will now question when people say that fundraising is just like sales. I will say, but what about this? So you've given me good ammunition for that.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. So the last quick hit question has to do with getting the job done because you obviously cover a lot of ground, literally and figuratively, in the work that you do. You've done a lot of great things in your career. What's a tool that you use that helps you be more effective, more efficient? Now, I'll give you some background. Some people have talked about apps. Some people have talked about pen and paper. This can be something very obvious, but something that you appreciate as a tool that helps you get the job done. What do you think deserves a shout out?
So I'd love to tell you I have some crazy cool app that I use. I
Yeah.
don't. Half the time my kids are trying to show me how to work my iPhone still. So, I'm really old school.
Yes.
Um, and so I would say that my hack to all of that would be communication.
Hmm.
It's
Mhm.
really the basics,
Yeah.
going back to communication. And I tell young people this who work with me all the time when they quickly jot off an email or they send a text and the tone, there's no tone to it, right? The
Mhm.
person can easily misunderstand what you're trying to say. So I often say there's nothing that beats personal communication. If you can't walk down the hallway and have a one on one, face to face conversation with that person, at least pick up the phone and
Yeah.
speak to them. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yep. Yep. Especially if you're trying to build a relationship. It's one of the
Yes.
things I think maybe one of the best hard lessons out of the pandemic is the value of interpersonal communication.
Yep.
This video conference, what you and I are doing right now, is better than a phone call because I get to see your reaction. I get to see things that I wouldn't otherwise see.
Right.
But even a phone call without that is in many respects better for building a relationship than an email or a text will ever be. And I'm a big believer in efficient communication, but there's just qualities it brings that you can't match. And certainly the best of all is face to face. I think the lesson we learned is there's something about face to face that can't be replicated by anything else. It's why we've gone back to people traveling great distances to be with others. And your
Right.
whole job is about relationships. So if you can't master communication, you're not going to get very far. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And learn how to have those listening skills,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's so often when you're sitting across from somebody and there's that silence and people feel like, well, they just have to start talking to fill it. You don't.
Yeah.
Pause,
Yeah.
listen to them, ask them questions. I mean, everybody has such interesting stories, right? No matter what their walk of life and what they do in a career path, I love to collect those stories and hear things about people. So it's about taking the time to stop and listen to others. It's
Yeah.
amazing what you'll learn.
So I'm going to ask you a fourth question that you weren't prepared for, but I really love what you're saying and would like to hear more about listening skill. We live in an environment where it is wired for distraction. It's wired for
Mhm.
interruption. Everybody's talking over everyone else.
Yeah.
How do you, aside from, I really like the advice about, honoring the pause and not trying to fill every gap. But
Mhm.
what else do you recommend when it comes to listening? As someone who really is a full-time expert in listening, how can people listen more effectively in an environment that's working against them when it comes to attention?
That is one of my hacks. And I'll be honest, I'm going to tell you my
Yeah,
secret. I
yeah,
do this all the time. Now, obviously today I'm in my office, right? Because we're on video. But when I need to have a serious conversation
yeah.
and I need to make sure that, there's no distractions, email, phone, whatever, I go to my car. My car honestly has
Hmm,
become my second office.
hmm,
I can get in my car, I can park, and I can solely focus on the conversation I'm having, and I don't let anything else distract me.
Yeah.
It's one of my hacks.
That's amazing. So yeah, what I love about that is we have to create environments that foster listening, because the environment's not going to, the natural environment isn't going to do it for you. There's nothing wrong with you if you can't pay attention, if you're surrounded by technology, right? If you have a phone and a laptop and a tablet in front of you, you're going to lose. But if you put those things aside and you go to an environment where there aren't those distractions, I'm a big believer, for example, in walking meetings. Now, you can't do it with more than a couple people, but if I'm walking and talking, I can't do much else. So it sort of forces you to listen to the other person. You can't have screens with you. You can't have pen and paper, and that can be a detriment. But I've never thought of the car, but that's a great piece of advice.
I get so much quality work done in my car. Now, the mileage is a little high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But no, it's a great, it is one of my secrets to focusing and listening.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, Luella, my secret is learning from our guests. That's the whole reason I do this podcast, is to steal great ideas from people like you. So I really appreciate you sharing your insight with us and your story. As I mentioned, really fortunate for Asher as a whole to be able to work with you. Really appreciate your partnership, and hope to meet you face-to-face sometime in the near future.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time today.
Well, thank you, as did I. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.